Hello and welcome to another edition of the Commissioner's Report. I'm your host, Tricia Pichette, and joining me today is Commissioner George Lindsey. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, at the last Commissioners meeting, there was a contract signed for architectural services in reference to the Northeast Government Center.
Yes.
What is some of the background about this project?
Well, some years ago, our predecessors determined that it was wise to have a facility outside of Bartow to help the folks get to government services and not have to travel all the way to Bartow. And they then decided that what used to be the State Farm Building on the north end of Winter Haven, and later became a property of Winter Haven Hospital, would be a suitable location for a Northeast Center. Mm-hmm. It was the desire of the board at that time to enter a lease agreement with the property owners to facilitate these various county functions, which currently include the clerk of the court, county probation, court administration. The Polk County Health Department has an office there, property appraiser, the public defender, state attorney, supervisor of elections, all those things. Wow. That the population need to have interface with those various departments. Mm-hmm. And rather than travel all the way to Bartow and add more load to the Bartow facilities, the Northeast Center was thought to be worthwhile and served a very good purpose for that part of the county. But as time has gone on, I think we went into that building in 2002. We're leasing about 30 or 40,000 square feet of that building. Over time, we've outgrown that facility. It was old when we moved into it. It's even older now. I think it was built back in the early 60s. So as the demand for services increased, a couple of years ago, the board decided it's time to start looking for a new facility. Early on, we were leasing, and as I said, it's probably a good idea to lease early on, but there comes a time that owning and building your own facility is a more prudent thing to go. And that's what the board has decided to do. So we engaged staff and all of our interested players and partners in this thing, identified a general geographic area of several square miles as to this is generally which will serve the purposes that we're seeking. And we invited the property owners and realtors and others that had facilities to submit them for review, so that we find those who are willing to sell and go through that evaluation process. Mm-hmm. So in that process, the county staff reviewed for the size of the site, proximity of infrastructure and the water and the sewer and the roadways and easy accessibility, and all of those things narrowed the field down from probably a dozen entries that didn't come close to those that did. Narrowed those down to 2. Then we went into more scrutiny of those final 2 about environmental concerns, again, ingress, egress, and anything peculiar about the site that we need to be aware of. And in that process, we decided on a single site in the northeast part of Lake Alfred, in their corporate limits, and struck a deal with the property owner. And I think for a little over $2 million, we're buying almost 30 acres. And while our target early on was probably 10 or 12 acres, the opportunity at this time and the single location, it seemed prudent to go ahead and acquire more than today's needs, and recognizing that future needs will have to be expanded. So I think
the other thing is there are aspects of this land that also made it a good idea. It's already cleared.
That's right. It's already cleared. It's already got space dedicated for stormwater retention, which obviously takes land out of use. It's big enough, as I mentioned earlier, the tax collector's role now includes issuing driver's licenses and conducting driver testing. So the site is now suitable to build a track so that he can conduct those driver testing on site. And some of the concerns he had expressed to the board in participation of this project was when you have a driving instructor or tester and a young new driver, getting out on the public streets may or may not be a good idea all the time. So having a controlled environment, contained on site, but still give the student a realistic test of their skills and what they're going to face in the public roadways was also a safety concern. So the site is suitable for that also. So it occurred to me that using this format we have here today is to show this thing coming out of the ground, because it's going to be maybe we'll be in this thing in 18 or 20 months, something like that. So to watch it come out of the ground, to get a baseline of, here's the vacant piece of property, here's what it looks like today, and hopefully we can have one of those time-lapse cameras that watch things come out. Oh,
excellent.
Yeah. I think staff did that for the parking garage a couple years ago.
Yep.
So maybe we can do the same thing, watching this building come out of the ground. Again, we got all the players together, public defender and state attorney and all those things, to do a space analysis, and working with an architect that we recently retained. They'll decide how much goes where. Another special consideration is to have at least one, probably two court rooms there for whatever the court decides is appropriate, whether it's traffic court or some other things that can be handled without all the pomp and circumstances of great big juries and so on, but still need that judicial review. And when you have all the paraphernalia associated with the courts, you have bailiffs and juries and prosecutors and all the things that go with it, particularly the judges. There is an extraordinary requirement for security.
Of course.
In courtrooms, and the people, and sometimes tempers flare. So while it will be a single building, there will be multiple entries. If you have a court issue, you go here. If you're getting your license tag, you go there. And if you're paying a utility bill, you go here. So designing that flow, getting people to the right place as quickly as possible, and still maintaining the security features that are necessary, extraordinarily high for the judicial uses, less so for ordinary day-to-day uses like utility bills and tags and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So that's a careful balance that the architect and the space planners will have to go through. Then we'll turn it over to the contractor, which we've also recently retained, and say, how can we value engineer this thing for the most cost-effective building? Because these extraordinary features are more than just building a warehouse or a home. So the cost per square foot is going to be, on the higher ends, because they're extraordinary, customized features. And they're built to last for decades, because this will be a lasting monument and grow as time allows to meet the needs of the people in that part of the county. So I'm excited about it. I'm anxious to see it come out of the ground. It's like the Rubik's Cube. You change one thing and everything changes.
I'll bet.
So it's going to be fun to watch and see how all those parts and pieces come together at the same time, maximizing use of the site. I was reminded that the Board of County Commissioners approved, I believe it was a $250,000 on your tax roll, on your tax bill, to fund this thing for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, that would sunset and come off. It was dedicated for this sole purpose, to create the dollars necessary to build the facility, acquire the land, and put it in operation. So.
And then it goes away.
Then the millage goes away.
That's excellent.
Yes.
Huh. Does that happen? That cannot happen often. I mean, that's someone who understands that sometimes taxes are necessary, but doesn't want things to get out of control.
I think it came out of our planning retreat a couple of years ago as to, excuse me, this is the need. We don't have existing revenues to do it. It is a an issue we can't ignore. So how do we approach this and satisfy the need and be fiscally responsible? So the idea of a kind of a special assessment for that limited purpose, for that limited time, and then whatever that generates in the total revenue, then you make it work within that revenue.
Excellent.
And so that, I think that is an important part of our retreat with senior staff and the board, to set priorities, understand the consequences of your decisions. What are we doing good that we can let go on itself, and where are we short and how can we improve that? I think we recognized a few years ago we need to put a greater emphasis on fire and EMS safety, and this board has done that. And I think recognizing the need for the Northeast Center falls in that same category. And the retreat is the genesis of the budgeting process, not only for the current fiscal year, but years ahead. It sets priorities, it sets expectations, and then we measure ourselves on how well we've addressed those issues. And sometimes folks say, well, you just adopted a $1.5 billion budget in 30 minutes. Well, that 30 minutes started 7 months ago.
Absolutely.
And each time the board meets in various arenas and sessions, an incremental part of that budget process is refined and moves forward. And the Northeast Center was recognizing a need, a long-term need, and not just looking at the here and now, but the next generation. And that happens on many, many fronts. We've been on this same forum and talked about future water needs in our county. And that comes out of our planning sessions also.
Well,
So,
I know that the northeast part of the county is important, and I know that everyone is curious about how we're dealing with the growth and so forth in that area. And on this program, we don't usually tend to go back and revisit things, but thank you very much for seeing that there are going to be a lot of people interested in this center, how it's going up, how it's paid for, what the progress is, and for agreeing to allow us to revisit this topic with you as it continues.
I'm looking forward to it, and using that time lapse, if not time lapse, at least a progress snapshots along the way to watch it come out of the ground, and then I won't have to come up with a topic for the next year.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next one and to seeing the progress we've made. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, ma'am.
And thank you for watching another edition of the Commissioner's Report.